Hello, and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, a man whose heart is unfortunately encased in a weak, muscleless mass of an inexperience.
Tim Longo.
But I have heart.
Yeah.
So
that jerk. It's interesting for me to anyway, I guess we'll get into the bonus topics.
We will. Yeah, that's a little touching on the Ratchet and Clank sort of best of / remake / retell the story in a different way, probably heavily influenced by the movie, I assume. I think some of the cutscenes are actually maybe directly from the movie. So there was a point when when you started the game, and it goes straight into some of those really nice CG cinematics. And I was like, oh, wait, did I buy the movie? And am I watching the movie right now? Right,
did I buy the wrong thing?
Yeah.
And I went back to the dashboard. I'm like, no, this looks like a game that I'm running. It's just such a funny moment. But then I guess like is Quark in jail in your understanding of playing the rest of the games? Like, is he supposed? He's
in jail. He's in jail in this, and he's telling it.
No, I mean, I know he is in this, but I mean, because you've played all of the games in
right. Yeah,
in the story.
There are definitely times when he is in jail. So,
okay.
Yeah. And I feel like this might be the one that has the little levels where you play him in in like little mini games, like side scrolling, hollow games. Like they're just little mini levels, which are like you play Quark.
How funny.
It's such a bizarre. It's so bizarre. The series is so all over the place. But before we get to that, we should because that's bonus talk. We should talk about the last level and the final boss, which I guess you got on the first try. Do I have that?
You son of a. I don't know, somewhere around 15 times or so, maybe 10, 15, maybe.
That is not that bad, considering.
Maybe even 20, I don't know.
Considering how relatively under prepared you were, like you didn't have lots of extra weapons and.
Oh, I haven't done it yet. I never.
Oh, you still have. You finally did give up. Okay.
No, I know I did give up. Yeah. Well, okay. No, I don't know if I've given up because I still. Because we have a bonus episode after this, I'm going to give myself that amount of time to potentially go back because I feel like, I mean, I'm at the last phase. Like I got close. He was down to, I don't know, a fifth.
But you only have the four.
Oh, it's painful. Yeah.
Lives.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. That's rough. That is a tough fight. I mean, it's all pattern recognition stuff. Do you at least have the suck cannon?
Yeah. I've been using that quite a bit. Okay. The thing is like nothing really, I feel like nothing does a lot of damage to him.
No.
And there's no bolts. So, cause I have the thing where I can buy ammo at any location. I have the upgrade. So I can be in the middle of the battle and buy more Devastator rockets or whatever. Right. But that's like 1,000 bolts a pop, and so as I'm and as you when you go back to your checkpoint, you don't get your bolts back.
Nope.
So I'm basically draining those, right, with no replenishment.
I didn't. It took me a while to beat it too, and I have 8 hearts, and and I was also kind of draining away my resources. I started around 22,000, and when I started getting down around 20,000, I was like, all right, I'm just going to go. I know there's another thing where I can get another 10 or 15,000 bolts. Remember the first place, your big clank? There's a door. There's a door at the end of that level, which is like, oh, you need the code cracker or code something or other.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Some special thing, and that's on his ship in the fleet. If you go into the water in the fleet, there's which is listed as a mission. If you go into that water and swim, there's like an obstacle course basically where you have to swim through like 3 hoops at several stages, and that opens up a door to the next stage. At a certain point, you turn off like it's electrified and it becomes a timed obstacle course besides. So it's like you have to race through and then, get to the end and do 3 more loops and, go get up and it electrifies behind you again. If you finish that, you get the code thing, I believe. And then you can take that and go back to that planet, Quarto, I think it is, with the factory, and get, I want to say it was 15,000 bolts as well as a gold bolt. To
do what?
So that I could buy the Tesla cannon.
Oh, okay.
Which is the last weapon before the RYNO. I mean, it's cost 30,000 or whatever. So, but that does a fair amount of damage to him, and I just was kind of running along, getting close enough to him to just like constantly zap him especially as he was dropping like those bombs or whatever. It made it a lot easier. That does do a fair amount of damage. So it was pretty straightforward with that.
I thought that the Tesla was available to me right now in the regular store, but it was 30 or something, and I just didn't have
right. No, that's what I mean. I went to do that to get the money.
I see.
Yeah. I was like, I know that's a big windfall. I don't remember how much it is, but I'll just go do that, and then
got it.
I know I'll get a bunch of money for that, and I didn't remember how much, but it ended up being more than I needed by a substantial margin. So yeah, I had like 37 or 38 or something when I finished it, and then I went back and bought the Tesla, and I think I beat him the next try, I guess. Yeah. I think I just needed the Tesla coil was the big thing that helped. So
yeah, I did after I kind of gave up. I did end up watching a video, and they were using the Tesla on him for sure. And they also had eight lives. So, it's like I'm for the listeners who aren't keeping up, I have not upgraded anything. I played, basically only critical path for the most part. I did get a couple side objects for sure. Some of the extra gear that you don't need, like the being able to purchase from anywhere, and the like cheaper stuff, stuff in the store, a couple of those sorts of things. But yeah, so it's so that level in general. So I mean, we didn't talk about the fleet level, which I thought was pretty fun and was neat to go from ship to ship, and it was very much testing out. I think a lot of that level, the last 2 levels, I've really had a good time with, because I think they're definitely testing all of your skills and utilizing all of your toys all in one level, or 2 levels. And
it's really fun to have the time pressure of it's like a stealth level, because you've got to go into the hologram robot guys, and so it's like you have to switch to that. You have to get past robots, and like they're going to turn around, and they'll set off something, and and sometimes you're not near enough up to them to be able to just attack them and stop them from doing that. So you're like timing, can I get closer? I got to jump this gap, and then I got to go straight into my thing again, and that's a really fun section. It very also reminds me of Galaxy Quest every time I play that, because it's like, who would design a room like this?
Right.
In that section when they're in the engine room access or whatever in that movie.
Yeah.
So
what year did Galaxy Quest come out? That's funny. I wonder.
That's a good question. I want to say like 97. That would be my guess. I will look. But
99.
Yeah, I was not far off.
But yeah, that's a funny touchstone, because it's such a you can see that they probably were influenced by it quite heavily. But anyway, yeah, it was a good, and then there's just some good memorable moments. Obviously, you get another space battle in there. There's that section where you go outside and you're walking outside on the outside of the ship, and you go upside down, and then you have to go find the fighter to blow up the turret so you can keep walking magnetically upside down to, the big cruisers. So that was cool, walking, it's just good fantasy fulfillment, magnetically walking on the outside of a capital ship in space. You have a space helmet, so might as well.
Why not? Yeah, sure.
So it's good. They're just really, really well. And to your point about the stealth stuff and the timing and the sort of combinations of enemies and stuff, it's just good design and comboing of enemies and level design and stuff. So that was fun. And then the last level, I just thought, it very much felt like the best of as well, where you're using every key that you have, whether it's water or the trespasser or what have you. There's even, I think, some rail stuff and some magnetic stuff. And then the boss itself, though hard, it's not often that you get bosses that have phases that are so level centric, because you're moving from platform to platform, and then you have your swing shot to use in between that stuff, and then the boss areas get destroyed and you're jumping around, and then it just is sort of, it's a nice progression, and you're learning the mechanics, and they're adding more mechanics to the boss element as you go to each section, and so you have time to learn some of that stuff. And even though I'm doing it in the hardest fashion possible, I will say though, because I had done it so many times in a row, which you maybe saw as well on a smaller scale, but like I very clearly see the dynamic difficulty kicking in.
Yeah.
Because I died so many times. And then by the last time I was playing, attempting it, I'm in the third stage in that one arena, and there's just ammo everywhere because they're just popping it out, and because of his ring, that little, the grenade launcher thing that he fires that creates the rings of fire, it destroys all the crates, of course. So there's just, so you kind of automatically see what's there.
Yeah, you just run around and pick up all the ammo at that point. Yeah,
I'm surprised. Sure. I'm surprised that they don't by that point have any sort of health related things that you can do, because it's pretty much like you're out of luck. There's no way. There's like 2 that you get along the way to replenish, but it seems fairly stingy at that. And so, I'm kind of...
Yeah, I was a little surprised that there isn't something based on, because it's very common in a boss battle to have some point at which health appears, right? To give you a chance, right? Especially given that you have to go through, all the different basically floating plateaus, right, every time, right? It's not like you start in that final arena once you get there. It's like, you got to go back to the beginning, which is a little much for sure.
Yeah.
So what do you think? I feel like it's just a different era, as far as I think the game expects you to have gone and done a lot of extra instead of just the critical path. So yeah,
I don't know. I think it is the era as well, but like, to me, gold bolts are very clearly extra, and that's and they're hidden in such a way, most of them, where it sends that message pretty clearly, but then those are the only way to upgrade your weapons, right? So, and then you even mentioned that thing that you just talked about with that, getting those extra bolts cost a gold bolt too. So I guess you use them for other things as well.
No. I needed to go get the device. There was a gold bolt in the vault with all the money. So I see. In addition to the money, I got another gold bolt. Yeah, it didn't cost me one.
Okay. Yeah, so you got another one. But anyway, yeah, so case in point, how difficult that one was to get. But I know some of them are easier, and I did get a few. But to be honest, I still haven't found where to upgrade, even if I had the cash. So, it's just like currency-based systems like this are tricky, because it really ultimately it promotes grinding, right? Like I came into the last level with about around 22 as well, and now I have probably 2,000 because I've drained it by just buying more stuff along the way as I'm fighting the last boss. So, I mean, I could go back to that save and start the level over, or I could go and leave and go power myself up some, So I don't know. I'm always, I think it is a very much an era thing, and it kind of bums me out because because I don't think we've talked about it time and time again, but upgrades like that should be additive, not required. So if you spend the time to upgrade yourself, like you have, and you get all that stuff, then maybe add more to the boss or something based on that, or maybe you just make it like reward the player for doing it. Don't punish the player for not doing it. That's kind of, and going in with overpowered to that boss, that seems okay to me. Like make it easier for them because they spent the time.
If you do New Game Plus and you have the RYNO or whatever, and you get I think you can get the gold version of the RYNO. That fight is ridiculously easy at that point.
Oh, really?
I mean, it's absurd. Like it's literally playing, like the Eroica or something, when their Symphony No. 9 or whatever, when it's the Ode to Joy, when you start playing the thing, it's just like whoosh, it's going off all over the place, and just like all these ridiculous amounts of things are firing out of it, and and it's very funny because you're just like, it's a hold down the button to just constantly fire, like the blaster or whatever. And the music will just start and stop based on you press and hold the button or not. So
how funny.
It's very entertaining. And I think it'll pick up where it was. So it's like you can let go and start again, let go and start again. It's very entertaining. That's my recollection. Yeah. I might be confusing it with another version of it in a different game, but yeah, it's terrific stuff. But that is very hard to get in the primary playthrough. I mean, it's 150,000 bolts just to get the RYNO, and then I'm sure it's some ridiculous amount to get it gold plated, if you even can, in the first playthrough. So it's pretty ridiculous. It is. It's funny because the game never feels really stingy to me, but I never like when something is that grindy to get in a first playthrough. Like, that's clearly the big thing. And then, like, when I think about it, I've never really had, I think the most I ever had at once was that 37,000. And it's like, oh, good. I'm, a quarter of the way to that weapon, right? I mean, I could have, I guess, not bought anything else the rest of the time, but I'm not sure that's the way they want you to play either. So I'm not sure, what that's about. Well,
we've talked about it before, and this era is just as guilty of this as the arcade era, but it's like they want you to go back in, and they want you to spend as much time playing the game as as possible and get your money's worth, kind of thing, right? It's just, that's the which we still struggle with today, and not traded in, and we still struggle with, right? It's like how, because the production for AAA, at least, the budgets are so big. You want people to race through the game, in 6 hours, if you can help it. So, and then be done with it and shelve it. So there's, I don't know. Yeah, it's the age old conundrum. And the thing is I feel like up until this boss, I was fine. Like, I felt like it was perfectly balanced. Like, I felt like I had challenges at the right times. I felt challenged. I didn't feel like it was too easy. I could fool around with the weapons I could afford, and I have quite a few of them. I mean, I still probably have 5 or so that I don't, but I feel like I still have, and I have enough where some of them I'm not using at all. So, so clearly I have more than I need, and I'm enjoying it. And I would say even, I just think his health is too much. He just has too much health. That's really the only balancing problem, is because I'm hitting him a lot. I'm dodging fine, and just when you only have 4 pips, a couple false moves, and
doesn't take a lot of mistakes. Yeah. And it's not very forgiving because it doesn't give you any health back at any point. So that definitely is pretty rough. Yeah. Occasionally I'd throw out the decoy, ring of decoys, but also the glove of doom, just to help clear out things. And mostly though, it was the suck cannon intake and outgoing. I would try to fire that on him, and then when I went back and got the Tesla cannon, it was like, oh, I switched to this as soon as I can get close enough to him to start really doing some damage while I'm chasing after him. And it just takes him down really fast. So I sort of feel like that's probably what happened, was like they expect you to get that, and then it's not difficult, right? And that was kind of the approach of the day, you know. And like, and if you had gotten, like, I feel like it's basically like their idea of the minimum, you know, like you said, punishing you, you know, for not doing stuff. I think they thought that wouldn't be much more for most players. They probably didn't sit down and analyze it that way, but I feel like the QA department probably said, well, you know, I think most people will have the Tesla, you know, whatever.
They balanced it on the average, not on the minimum.
Exactly. Yep. Exactly right. Yeah. Like, oh, nobody will have the RYNO. So that was like the big reward, is you get the RYNO, and it's like, oh, it's a cakewalk, right? It's super easy. But if you don't, and you just get the average of getting everything else, and except for the RYNO, right? I mean, yeah, that would make a big difference. So,
and to use right, and to use an example, that they don't have difficulty levels in this game, but to use an example from Halo, that's you know, obviously from my past, and I didn't establish this, Bungie established this, but or 343 didn't establish this, but you know, the sort of like Bungie's always been on record saying that heroic is like the way to play that game, and that's not the normal difficulty, you know. So it's like they tune normal to be like, yeah, just go through, have fun, you're going to be fairly fine. But if you really want to like see what the game's got to offer, you should play on heroic, which is the second level difficulty level, right? And heroic's a whole different thing, but and it is generally then, and that's how they would balance, right? So it's like that's for the average, right? Somebody who is really like wants to dig in and, you know, and get extra stuff and all that kind of stuff. And if you're not the average, if you're doing bare minimum, then normal's fine, you know. So I just kind of wish that was the case here, but I totally get the mentality. And it was just bummer because they're so close. They're so close to having the balancing be fine. So, still enjoyed it though. I mean, the game's really good. And I definitely, it is a series. I can see why you got hooked on it and have played it so, you know, fanatically.
So much.
Yeah. I'm surprised you wanted to do this at all. I mean, I guess you love the series enough where you're willing to play it again, but it's like, well, I also so much, but
I mean, also saw it, you know, as a really good example, like I said, of like iterated design, you know, in product, right? In a yearly, basically an annual product, you know, and it really was like, I think when I replayed it, you know, in whatever 2014 or something like that, you know, I played these PS3 versions. I remember going, oh wow, like, you know, because I just, you know, played some of the PS3 ones or whatever, and it just was like, oh wow, I did not remember like how what they didn't have yet in the first one, you know, quality of life and like stuff that we see that we'll talk about in the bonus, but just the automatically, you know, that you don't even have to go get the swing shot in the most, you know, recent version. You just have it, which is hilarious. They just want to skip over that. I mean, I don't even remember now the quest to get it, right? It's you know, it's just one of those things. I was like, hey, you just have it now, you know. It's you just go crazy, swing shot away. It's so much, you know, so much of the game has navigation in it that you're sort of like, oh, of course that makes sense. Like, why would you not have some of the cool navigation just from the beginning? That's just such a huge core part of its identity. You know, go to it. So
yeah, and that's I mean Insomniac is a great example of a studio that does this, but you know, it's just that's third person action adventure game, you know, that's just how it is. You know, you don't you know, that's you want to give them the tools as you're getting them, and it's not, I mean, some of them go more RPG, I guess, sometimes, but yeah, I mean, it's this, I think that they're like playing, we'll get to it in a second, but playing the modern version, I feel like, you know, Insomniac has their version of Nintendo perfection in that. I see, and I've only played, whatever, a couple hours or something, but I've seen enough to know that it seems like the formula has been perfected. Maybe is too strong of a word, but they've definitely found a sweet spot, which is I'm pretty impressed. Pretty impressed. In fact, I really want to go back and play more of that. To be honest, because it's so modern,
Yep, 3-day weekend coming up.
I know.
It's the opportunity. Let's turn then to takeaways. We've ended up spending quite a lot of time talking about the final level. It was more than I expected. Let's talk about our takeaways at the end of any series. We like to do that. I just realized I do not have a book recommendation, so that will have to hold for our other bonus episode.
We have another bonus surprise episode.
I'll have to go think about that. That's a hard one for me. I don't read a lot of books about boys and their robots, so I'll have to really give that some thought. But what, sir, is your first takeaway?
My first takeaway is kind of a silly way to say it, but overly simplified way to say it is, it's basically do what is coolest for the player all the time. Like, I feel like as a franchise, it's like, what's the coolest thing we could do with this weapon? What's the coolest thing we could do with this level? What's the coolest thing we could do with Clank? And I'm putting it in the context of 2002, putting in the context of 2016, which we'll talk about after this, only reinforces this takeaway for me even more, because they just seem to keep, I'm assuming that with every iteration, they keep going with that, because it's just a game about like, even just the distilling it down to a simple concept in the bolts themselves. I mean, at this era, like the concept of blowing up a crate and seeing physics pieces fly all around was just a thing we all love to do. So it's like games just started doing it more and more. So what did they do? They made the pieces that come out of crates into bolts, which are currency that you use to buy things, so it's like, just have fun, like make it cool. Like what is, and there's something, from my perspective, there's something freeing about like, and to your point, like it's such a wacky series where they probably really had very few limitations on world fiction, what they could do with a weapon, what they couldn't do. They just like, it's just a canvas for whatever the heck they want to do. That's fun for the player. And I don't know, it's a pretty broad takeaway for me, but I do feel like I felt like, I mean, again, like I think the best example for me was big robot Clank. Yeah. It's like they set it up and you're getting there and you're like, and there's even, I forget how the scene goes down, but the scene before it happens, or sort of, I feel like there's a little feint there for a second where you're like, are they going to let me do this? And then you're like, oh no, and no, it looks like they're not going to. Oh no, they are. And then you're big Clank and you're just like, that's cool, right? Flying ships multiple times, the rail shoes, it's like, and it's definitely it goes to one of my other takeaways is the sort of 90s attitude. But anyway, yeah, or maybe aughts attitude, but yeah, do what is cool. Yeah, for me, I'd say the first thing, and I think it's pretty echoes, especially some of the last part of what you said, but it's just variety. It is constantly varied. You don't ever feel in a rut with a Ratchet and Clank game, because it's not. I mean, you might if you're going back and trying to collect everything or whatever, because you're doing kind of the same things. But even then, in a lot of cases, you'll be going back to levels where, oh, I didn't have this tool, right? I didn't have the thing that lets me swim fast, which I don't know if you even have. Yeah, I thought there was something like that, but I never found it. I feel like it must be on Politaru, which is the, oh no, it's not. It's Hydro Clank. So yeah, where is Hydro Clank? I can't remember now. It must be on Politaru. Okay, yeah, the island planet, But yeah, I mean, it's just, there's, you're just always doing different stuff. So you go all the way back to like Novalis, that
basically first level. And where you meet the plumber, and there's this place being taken over, and there's a drop ship with the mayor in it and all that stuff, and you go, and now you can swim upstream. You couldn't do that before because it was too strong, right? And so you're seeing a new look at this area and things like that. There's always something like that. And if you're going to go back and find those collectibles, so it even kind of layers on to the sort of retread of levels, is like, oh, I actually have more tools now that I'm coming here, with a few exceptions, right? Those last few levels are not, you pretty much have all the tools at that point. So you're not necessarily going to see something different, but yeah, I mean, I just love that. I think the game scales pretty well across that, which I think will be a sort of a separate point, but yeah, it's something that I find endlessly rewarding and enjoyable. And I probably play it again in another 10 years and have just as much fun, despite the fact that I've now played all the way through whatever 5 times, at least 5 times. So, and I get all the skill points at some point, right? I mean, it's just like, I've done everything this game has to offer. So yeah, it's, and that's a lot of variety for me. And I love that about it. So yeah. Takeaway 2.
Takeaway 2 is probably one I've had in some other game series before, but it's I guess for me, I guess a little bit of Zelda-itis, but it's sort of infusing RPG elements into yet another genre that didn't have much of it. And this is very, very light RPG, but the concept of gearing up and over time, like Ratchet just has a bunch of these gear items that he's gotten from, and it feels sort of RPG like, because you're kind of you're gearing up and you're unlocking your toolbox, like you were just saying, and then Clank as well. And then you can upgrade your stuff, which, I didn't get to do very much of, but, or in the guns case, none of those, but the concept of adding some of that stuff in there that allows you to sort of progress the character, if you will, to make the character feel, which again, Zelda does as well. And this isn't the traditional RPG elements per se, but it just gives you enough of a feel versus, say, a Mario, which is very fleeting when you get upgrades, right? Like you get, whether you get a fire flower or whatever. So, right. And this is more permanent, right? Like when I get the fun example for me that I'll give is, when I get that gear item that gives me cheaper weapons at the store, that little Jedi device that, convinces people or whatever, a little whirligig thing on it. It's right on his chest. He puts it on and it's on the model, and it's there prominently displayed in every cinematic, and you got it, you acquired that thing, and it feels like you're, leveling up, so to speak. So, yeah, that's my next one.
Cool. For me, and this, I mean, it's partly ties in with my first one, and it will partly tie in with my third one. But that is leaning hard into the weapons, just going all out on the madness of the weapons and just how insane they are. I will say, by the way, there is, oh gosh, I forget what planet it is, but it's very near the end. So it's like maybe the 5th one back from the end of the game. Before you get in your spaceship at the end of the level, which I feel like at that point was like a new spaceship or something. If you look to the left, there's this tall building, and there's a jump hall, right? A thing that you can jump up on, jumping left to right. Mm-hmm. To get up to the top. That's how you get up into the room that has the gold bolt dispenser. So you have to keep an eye out for things like that some of the gold bolts you find that way. It's like, oh, hey, this thing that I just walked through turns out it's not an archway that's tall. It's actually just goes up until it opens to an area, so you just you kind of have to be sensitive to the distances in order to find those things, and just kind of have that as a lens as how you view the environment. Like, oh, could I jump back and forth on that thing? Constantly be asking yourself. Because if you can, that is probably a place where you'll find something. Anyway, yeah, I mean, it's a game about weapons, and there's a lot of them. You know, they didn't make a game about weapons where it's like, oh, here, have 4. You know, they're like, here, you know, have, you know, 20 or whatever it is, 16, something like that. You know, it's like, here, have a whole bunch. And they're all good. Like, none of the, you know, there are some that are probably less useful, but they're still fun to use. Like the Walloper, which is the glove that you had mentioned, is still fun to use, and it will go through sort of solo, you know, bigger enemies pretty easily. It's, you know, it's, I don't know, I find all of it pretty fun. It's why in later games where you can just level up every weapon just by use, I just like doing that. And it really doesn't matter what weapons, you know, it is. I would go. There were a couple games that had like arenas with combats, you know, like a tournament style thing where it's like, oh, fight this set of things, then this set of things, and blah, blah, and just keep going. And you could go and just replay any stage of that you wanted later. And it's like, oh, okay, I'll just go do that for a while with this new weapon I have, and level it up and just see how it works and when it's good to use and things like that. And, you know, so you'd have like a lava sprayer, you know, which melts enemies, and you're like, cool, I'm going to use that so much, you know, or whatever. But here, you know, I just love, I love all the weapons, you know, even the ones that, like, it's unfortunate you could never use the Visibomb in the final battle, because that's a kind of cool weapon, you know, to fire and, like, you know, ride it to your enemy, steer it to your enemy and things like that. I mean, it's just so many good ideas that, you know, any handful of the guns here, you know, other games would just be like, oh, and here's your gun arsenal. And here it's like, no, we have, you know, 3 or 4 times what any other game is going to give you. Right. And that's pretty great. So that is my second.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I have a sort of a bonus one, but my last one is really the same one that you just said for the most part. And that's really sort of embracing the shooter platformer combo, and with emphasis on shooter, because as far as, like, we talked a lot about in the first episode about this sort of mascot era and how each of the publishers were dealing, first party publishers primarily, but even third party, were dealing with the mascot challenge, you know, and you know, I feel like for the most part, a lot of them kind of ended up sort of, if you look at the sort of, again, Venn diagram of mascot games, a lot of them have a lot of similarities, and there are a lot of just platforming and a lot of focus on, I mean, I haven't played Jak and Daxter, if at all, maybe a little bit, you know, but I know it's not about shooting. And so, you know, the fact that they did double down on weapons in arguably a sort of, it's minimal platforming, but it is a mascot platformy kind of game. You know, you have a little guy running around, you're jumping around, but then the guns being so much of a focus differentiates it so much as far as a takeaway for me. It's like, and also myself being a shooter fan and not being a mascot game fan, you know, this is sort of this weird, interesting mixture that speaks to me more than others would, being a, you know, already self-admitted not being a Mario fan at all, which, you know, which is heresy, I know, but but give me a gun, I guess, and, you know, especially a gun that, like you said, does insanely wacky things with really no limitations. Again, the rule of cool, as we say in the D&D world, I guess, that I was talking about up front. Like, you know, all the weapons were fun to use, and I didn't mind, you know, getting them. And you don't feel bad about spending the bolts of buying them because you're usually getting something fun from it. So, and just very imaginative. So they have a great setting in a sci-fi, you know, kind of kid-oriented world to have fun with that stuff, and give themselves permission. And so that, yeah. Anyway, that shooter platformer hybrid, similar to my previous one of like RPG platformer hybrid, that seems like a huge goal for them that they keep going forward with. Yeah,
for sure. I guess my final takeaway then will just be the sort of one that wraps it all up together, which is something I admire in any game, which is, of course, generosity. I feel this feels like very generous design. We've talked about it in kind of the small ways, which is like, the bolts that fall off the edge. If you couldn't get to them, we'll just give them to you. That's on us. Hey, we didn't give you those bolts. You shot something out of the air over a cliff. We'll just make sure you get those. Those are credited to you. And the whole game feels that way. There's, it's like, oh, you clear a level and you come back. Okay, get all the bolts again if you want, right? They do that for people who want to grind, and but also just the variety is in a sense of a generosity here. I mean, they have a lot of different modes of interacting with the world. As Giant Clank, or as the ships, or swimming, or floating around, or climbing around on magnetic whatever's, all the different ways of navigating.
Lots of different things to do.
Yeah, huge amount of stuff. And I think that generosity is born out of trying to say yes to the rule of cool, right? Like you said already. It's like trying to say yes to your designers when they say, what if we put in all over the place? What if we had a gadget where you could get a little mouse in a UFO to come out and join you and shoot alongside you for a while? It's like, what? It's just such a weird question to say yes to, and I think the later you go in game development, the harder it becomes to say yes to those questions. But you never feel in this game, except maybe towards the end where you maybe don't have as many weapons as you like. The RYNO is one that's just still kind of strange that's not a little easier to obtain the first time out. But yeah, they just say yes to the player. Yeah, go crazy. Here you go. Everything you want. It's all here. So I love that about it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and I think your previous one about variety goes well with that one too. I just think, I mean, in they have the whole planet hopping motif, right? So it's like you get variety there, like you just said, all the different verbs that you get, which I just continue to be amazed that they, like, there's a section, there's a moment in the last level where you get to sort of a dead end, and you see this sort of like metal support structure that's there in the room or in the section, and you realize it's sort of a ramp, and you're like, wait a second, I can just walk up that, and you just do it, and it just happens. You know what I mean? And just though, it's just like, it's just so cool to be able to use all of these things, and to feel so empowered to have all these different modes that Ratchet just feels like a complete badass. And just the, like you said, the variety of different things you can do is just, it's just very, usually it's more about like this franchise versus, say, something more systemic, I guess, where it's like you have a few different verbs that you're using, but you can use them a bunch of different ways because it's a more systemic world or something. This is more of like, no, we're just going to handcraft and give you fun stuff to do all the time and put the time and effort into doing that. And then the time we're maybe saving on making these elaborate systems are saved by having these great set pieces and fun things that you're doing with each of these tools you get. So yeah, it's a different mentality, but I think it fits really well. And it's, I mean, as a studio like Insomniac, being able to do this and then also being able to do open world games and, first person shooter series, so it's just it's quite a studio. It
really is. And one thing I'll note about that I really appreciate with the credits is that it's just everybody's name in alphabetical order.
Yeah.
6 or 8 people to a page, and whatever, 40 people or something like that on this project.
I haven't seen credits, but I'll trust you on that.
Ted Price is just there in the middle of them.
Yeah.
It's his company. He's the president. He makes it possible for all those folks to work there. Granted, they turn around and deliver the games. So it's a good partnership, but he's just one of the Insomniacs, right? He's not, there's no hierarchy listed at the end. There are no titles. It's just, these however many people made the game. I
Yeah.
didn't count,
Yeah.
but I do really appreciate that too, especially because then you go to like Sony's credits and it's like a million people with a million, ever more impressive titles as you go deeper into the, it's like, oh, the VP of such and such at so and so location and blah blah blah. You're like, okay,
Yeah,
I got it.
Yeah.
I've already gotten the people who made the game. Now I'm getting other people with the titles. So that's just kind of a side note. Anyway, you said you had a bonus one before we turn to bonus content.
Oh yeah, I already revealed it, but it's sort of the late '90s, early aughts attitude. It's just got that attitude to it. Ratchet, especially playing, which we're about to go to the bonus.
Yeah, I was gonna say that might make a good segue then. Because he's so
a whole
snarky.
Different Ratchet.
Yeah, he's so snarky in this game, and it's such a unruly teen. And you watched the final cutscenes. You said
I started watching. Yeah, I watched them but didn't listen to them because I was trying to split the difference a little bit in case I finished. So I saw that there was Clank was sort of alone, and then Ratchet comes back, and I was very sad watching it and not knowing what was happening because I felt so bad for Clank. I was like, you little son of a, like, I just hate that Ratchet. And then we're playing this bonus, we're playing the modern one, and it's like, that guy's the greatest, so they definitely did a 180 on that in that character.
That guy's a wimp. We want the snarky one.
Yeah, I mean, I just,
that's West Coast, East Coast sensibilities right there all together.
That's perfect. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, the irony is I think Insomniac East is they're the ones doing these now. And
really? Yeah, that might be.
They moved to North Carolina and now
North Carolina, and now they're doing the nice Ratchet. I think that really was more so the movie more than anything else, is that I don't think that character...
Is he that snarky in the rest of the previous ones before this 2016 one?
Yeah, I mean he's definitely more. I mean he's always kind of a little edgier, whatever. I mean they have a much better friendship, but he has always got a little bit of attitude and whatever.
He's not likable to me, So it's weird to have a mascot be that snarky and unlikable.
Neither was Crash, Bandicoot or whatever. Not that he spoke, but he was, kind of an intentionally a jerky kind of character, and it was just kind of the way of things. I mean, he becomes more sympathetic in the trilogy that's on the PS3 or the whatever 3 or 4 games in the main series on the PS3, where he is. You find out like he's the last Lombax. He doesn't know what's happened to all the other Lombaxes, and that's kind of something that's finally being talked about in Rift Apart. There's this, this race of people, the Zoni, and it's all about them, and they created some Fisher in Time or something. I don't remember. There's this whole ongoing
and now I'm gonna have to play them all in order
now you have to play them all. Absolutely, you should. I certainly cannot clearly speak it to you, so you'll have to experience it for yourself. But yeah, I mean, I think that so that makes him more sympathetic, and also in the end he's like, oh hey, where are you going? We're going this way, with Clank, and he is, they are aligned, and they, of course Clank just saved his life. So, there's that, but, they finally unite in the end. And he's more likable, but he's always got that kind of edge to him. One of the other things I could have thrown in there was like the Warner Brothers aesthetic is a fun thing for me in this series. It just feels like Animaniacs or something like that, and that kind of ties into all that other the variety and the weapons, and I mean it all just kind of is part of the experience and the general aesthetic. And the Animaniacs are kind of jerks, right? So
no, that's true. It's true. There's a sort of a sweet spot there to kind of try to combo those up, or having the likable, like Bugs. I mean, it's Warner Brothers is sort of
you stinker.
Yeah, distilled down to Bugs. It's like you love them, but you hate them. And I think that the spectrum is not quite reached for me with Ratchet in this game. Yeah. So
I
it's
can
not
see that.
Quite. They didn't quite find the right sweet spot there, but I mean. they will iterate and refine, which which we know. So it's good that they got a chance to do that. So yeah, but on to the
remake. Yeah, so this came out in 2016. It was a time with a movie. I do think some of these scenes are from the film.
You think they're literally from the film?
I think they literally are. I can't remember, but I feel like that is true. I'll try to look it up, because I feel like that is also the framing story they're using here is with Quark in prison is also the framing story. I feel like they might also bring in more characters, than there are characters that they mention that are in the series.
The other overall. Rangers, yeah, like those. I mean, they definitely
and enemies and stuff.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, the guy that he's working for in the garage, right? Like it's like you have that sort of like mentor-ish kind of like boss kind of character. And then the Rangers, there's 3 different Rangers or 2 other Rangers with Quark, so there's like extra. Basically, it's like you need more supporting cast to support stories like that. So you better find some. I don't know if these characters are from the other games or not, or if they made them up for the movie. But then, I mean, the thing about the Quark opening, which was obviously caught me off guard, and I was assuming was just sort of like for a Ratchet and Clank fan, that you wouldn't be as caught off guard by it, but for not knowing what happens in the series, it felt weird. I guess if we hadn't just played the game, the original game, maybe it's not as weird, because you're like, if you don't know who Quark is, you're like, well, who's this guy? And then he's going to tell the story about who he is. So anyway, I guess that just was a little bit of a weird opening for me, but it was still interesting and clever and unique. And I love the narration, sort of like, this is what you see the events through Quark's eyes as he's, narrating. Plus he's narrating the tutorialization, which I think is quite clever. And I just like all the other characters, like having more characters to see. And interact with is just fun, right? Because I like the world quite a bit, and it's good that they're, of course, 117 is the guy that's. I don't know if you know that reference, but that's a Halo reference. But
is it?
Yeah, 117
was that what
Chief's
John
number.
Is?
Yeah,
no, I didn't know that. I looked at it when they so prominently displayed it. I was like, I know that number should mean something.
Yeah.
But that's not a thing that I would remember it being lore.
But anyway, So I and the music is great. Like it feels like a CG. The game feels like a CG movie.
So interestingly, it does share its models with the movie.
Oh, how funny.
Yeah, I was just looking it up. I could not find anything about the in-game cutscenes, whether or not they were directly taken from the movie, but the models are. It says they sent models over from the development, and the film would make some changes for film. I'm sure probably a lot to do with animation and things like that, rigging and things like that. But they would send them back with their changes, so that it would stay parity, that stay in parity, that the two would be equal or equivalent in that way visually. There are some like slight changes. I feel like Ratchet's ears are longer, and I felt like I can't remember now what I was thinking about Clank. Clank maybe not so much. He feels a little sturdier, maybe. I'm not sure why I feel that way. And while Ratchet feels like even lither, thinner or whatever. With longer ears, more pronounced ears, so that it's an interesting little tweaks on the characters. Whereas like Quark is almost exactly the same to me. He's like, oh yeah, that's Quark. That's just extremely high res Quark. They did
a good job there. It's and I think it's fun. The writing is better, much better, of course, and self-aware and not self-reflective, but what's the term? Referencing, I guess. They talk about the reboot of the reboot of the reboot. The plumber says, "See you next reboot." It's and then Ratchet looks at the camera, sort of like, "What does he mean by that?"
Yeah.
It's just a lot of fun. They're having fun with the absurdity of what they're doing.
That character shows up again and again, the plumber. In
the other games.
In the other games as well.
That's
so
great.
he's just a character they return. They just bring him back. Like whenever there's a sewer somewhere, they've got the plumber back to do the sewer stuff. I feel like he's a vendor in one of them. Like he's in the middle of a sewer and like you have to go to him for something. Like something like I think there's like basically poop crystals or something that you get in the sewers. It's ridiculous. And then you bring them to him and he'll give you something for them. It's so absurd. But yeah, it's very funny. And the big thing, I mean, the hugest change is you do see like the end result of a huge amount of evolution of the weapon upgrade mechanics.
Yeah. Well, also the game, just the core mechanics too. I was going to say too, right?
It's
just left trigger,
and the
right
navigation.
Trigger.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
and it's just like
and the triggering is all easier.
I'm playing right. All this stuff, contextual navigation, and then just like left trigger, right trigger. I'm just strafing and firing. It's just glorious. I just love it so much. It's like this feels so good, and it's doing what I want it to do, and just because it's a modern game, so obviously. But yeah, the upgrade you were saying about the upgrade system.
Oh yeah, I mean the weapons have I had forgot how much they even plussed up the weapons that were in the PS3 series, where every weapon had its own XP bar, and they would just power up, and there were like 8 power ups, and here it's like they level up, and you get with Raritanium, I guess you can buy upgrades that are laid out in a grid, so it's got kind of like a JRPG grid system to level up each weapon. But all those individual grids are just pictures of the weapons. I don't know if you noticed that.
Oh no, I didn't notice that.
They're like pixel, like hexel, versions of the
clever.
weapons, hexel images of the weapons. So it's like, the blaster is the blaster. It's pointing in cool. Pointing up and to the right, I guess. It's very clever. It took when I first played, I didn't notice because I was so focused on what the upgrades are. And I just didn't notice. And then I feel like there's a whole different collection mechanic, which I was playing. I was like, oh yeah, that's right. They also had this other thing. Those early games are generous. This is, a whole different level of quality, and it's still just as generous, if not in some ways more so, because I think it does have these Quark mini games inside of it, which are separate levels that are side scrollers. Pretty sure that's this game. And yeah, I mean, it turns everything up to 11. I mean, it's phenomenally gorgeous too. So
yeah, I was just going to say that. Yeah, it's a beautiful game. All the effects are amazing. Like there is just stuff happening, just stuff flying all over the place all the time. Like it's just insane how many, destructive bits and visual effects, and the levels are beautiful. The audio design is amazing. Like it's just like cream of the crop. And I'm wondering, to your point about generosity, like because this is a remake of, and a reboot, remake, whatever you want to call it, like that's like exactly the time you want to be generous, right? You're not trying to prove anything, really. Yeah. You're just trying to like it's a love letter to something that the team probably was really proud of, and whether they worked on the original or whether they inherited the legacy, it's still like it's part of Insomniac's legacy, and so it's like just have fun with it and be generous and just give the audience everything, and it's just fascinating, kind of a fascinating event, really, like because of the transmedia aspects of the movie, and then sharing models. And this was Sony purchase, but still you could see very probably Sony Pictures are the ones that did the movie, so
they are
connections there.
And I think it's the last game but one before they do the Sony purchase, because I think the next game that they put out was Spider-Man. I think that's true. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, probably.
I know at the time they were doing a lot of experiments, as still.
Well, they're doing VR stuff too.
Right, I was gonna say they were doing like side smaller experiments to try to, figure out, I think, how to move forward and like how to have the staff you need to make something like this, and still have things for them to do, et cetera. Right. So that I think that was part of it. Like a lot of companies have had to do, try to figure out what the strategy is for, it's like, do you outsource? Do you like, how do you have the staff to do, what you want to do, but not lay people off left and right, when that, it's time for that. So, so I think they did. Yeah, they did something called Edge of Nowhere in 2016, which I think
that's a VR. That's a third person VR,
right? So that would be why I don't know that.
Which is supposedly pretty good, especially for VR.
The Unspoken. I don't know what that is either. Maybe another VR thing. Yeah, so I don't know. They just
they experimented. They tried
a lot of that sort of stuff.
We mentioned that mobile thing they tried, Pulse or whatever it was called. So they experimented in things. And then they also opened another studio right in North Carolina. So, they even went in that direction. This game is just, like I said earlier, it's just, I just played through Novalis. So I just got to the Skid McMarks level. So I didn't play too far, but I did play enough. And it's just so good. Like, it feels good, looks good, sounds good, moves well, performs well. It's just like a distilled down version of a concept that nobody, like, very rarely do you get the opportunity to do this, what they're doing, right? Where they take a classic game like this and you remake it. It's happening a little bit more often now. As some of these games are having these sort of remakes happening, but there's another good example I'm trying to think of where it was not a remaster, but like a remake. Tip of my tongue. I'm sure people are screaming at their podcatchers, but
they basically, I mean, they got to, this is a point where they're, it's funny, while they're doing kind of like a big main game every 2 years. So 2014 Sunset Overdrive, 2016 Ratchet and Clank, 2018 Spider-Man, 2020 is Miles Morales, but also early 2021 is Rift Apart. You've got basically, they've kind of switched to this, and now they've got 2 studios, but they've also got, in 2015, 4 games, 3, looks like, 3 phone stuff and 1 Slow Down Bull, which was kind of a experiment on PCs. Then in 2016, in addition to Ratchet and Clank, they had 4 things. A lot of I guess that was all the VR stuff. 2 I'd never heard of at all. Song of the Deep is a Metroidvania that they also did that year. Kind of a downloadable title. I mean, everything's downloadable today, but sort of thinking more of scale-wise downloadable title than, something that's also, it was only downloadable, I guess is what I really mean. And then another game on the Magic Leap in 2018, right? I mean, they're just trying all that stuff, going all over the place to, like I said, give team members, I think, probably freer reign to try smaller experiments with smaller teams, which, that's a hard thing to do, and it's interesting that they did try it. So I don't know. It's a company that I continue to appreciate. I hope they maintain whatever it is that makes them them. That's very hard to do after an acquisition, but yeah, I think the games have been great for, a couple decades. So I hope they keep going.
Yeah. They're definitely one of the few that's been able to be that consistent. So it's pretty impressive. And this is I'm glad we played this one for the Insomniac game.
Yep, for sure. All right. Well, I hope you do decide to play more of the new one, because I do think it plays much more to you, with the controls, especially, I think make it a lot more approachable. The old one's very, early aughts finicky, haven't figured it out yet kind of stuff. And then, I putting it in my hands, I was like, oh yeah, this is very different, but totally easy, right? I mean, it's just, oh yeah, this is the way it should have been. I'm sure as they got to that point, they were like, oh right, this makes sense. Right, I mean, right. You just sort of feel that when you play a game like that. So anyway, let's turn to our outro stuff. I did want to mention we are going to do one more episode. We plan to next week. If for whatever reason that doesn't happen, we may have to take a week off because we've not talked about what's next. I guess we did, actually. I think I texted you at some point my thoughts.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that could maybe happen, but we will see. If you don't hear from us, check Twitter. We did not get any new reviews or really any new emails. Some short emails that I've replied to. One very long one that I'm meaning to reply to for a few weeks now, trying to catch up on those. But I'm not too far behind. But we love to have those. You can send email to devgameclub@gmail.com. And, of course, reviews in whatever podcatcher you use. I'm subscribed to all the iOS ones, but if you're using some other platform and you don't hear us read it, send us a link. Tell us where you review this, and we do love to read those on the air. You can find us on the web at devgameclub.com or on Twitter at devgameclub. Where you can also find my co-host at
Tim Longo Jr. with the JR at the end.
I'm getting all blah here at the end for some reason. You are also on Twitch at twitch.tv/Tim Longo Jr. I don't know if you're planning to stream tonight. I haven't had a chance to look.
No, I actually did. I did forget to message. I'm going to take another week off. I think I've chosen the game, but I'm not going to mention it here yet. It's probably going to be Control, actually. I think that one kind of fits the bill for me, but
that's very tempting. Very, very tempting. That is a game I also very much want to play.
So, yeah. I know it's up in my wheelhouse, and it's going to press all my buttons and all that kind of stuff. So it's my kind of thing. So that's probably what it's going to be. I have a second Dark Horse option that I won't mention, but maybe more of a surprise. But anyway, yeah, no, that's probably what I'm going to do. But yeah, I think I'm going to take another week off just to kind of recuperate a little bit. I'll try to get going next week.
Cool. Our intro and outro music was written and performed by Kirk Hamilton, commissioned by friends of the cast, Aaron Evers, and our logo is by Mark Garcia. Have fun totally nailing the final boss on your first try this week, and good night.
Good night. Yeah, good night. Jerk.
Good night, jerk. That's my favorite children's book. Good night, jerk.
Good night, jerk.